Hello and welcome to Williams Mullins Benefits Companion, a podcast that helps employers navigate the complex legal challenges of managing their employee benefit plans. I'm your host, Bryden DeWitt, and today we'll be discussing the latest round of coronavirus relief legislation. At the very end of 2020, right before New Year's, the Consolidated Appropriations Act was passed and signed by the president. And this legislation provided the $600 checks that are being discussed in the news, but also made changes that affect employers and sponsors of employee benefit plans. And so today I'd like to discuss some of the changes to the paid sick and family leave requirements that were in place under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the employee retention credit expansion that originally was enacted with the CARES Act last spring, and also some changes to flexible spending arrangements that plan sponsors who provide flexible spending arrangements need to be aware of going into 2021. So first of all, the new legislation expanded the paid sick and family leave credits provided under the FFCRA. The FFCRA required employers with under 500 employees to provide paid FMLA leave and paid COVID-19 sick leave to employees who are affected by the coronavirus pandemic, and then provided tax credits, refundable tax credits that employers could claim when they filed their employment taxes to offset the cost of that paid leave. This recent legislation extends the availability of the credit, of the tax credit for the paid FMLA leave and the paid sick leave through March 31st, 2021. But it does not extend the mandate. So employers are not required to provide the paid FMLA leave or the paid coronavirus sick leave after December 31, 2020. But employers who continue to provide the paid leave through March 31, 2021 may claim the tax credit to offset the cost of that leave. Additionally, the new legislation expanded the employee retention credit that was enacted under the CARES Act last spring. So the CARES Act Employee Retention Credit, or ERC, provides a credit to employers, a tax credit for employers who keep employees employed during the pandemic. So employers that have had a significant decline in their gross receipts or who were ordered to shut down or partially shut down due to the coronavirus pandemic were eligible for a tax credit to offset the cost of wages that were paid to employees during the shutdown or during the period of the decline of gross receipts. The Consolidated Appropriations Act expands and extends the employee retention credit. So first of all, employers under the original CARES Act, employers that received payroll protection program loans were ineligible to receive the employee retention credit. The recent legislation changes that. So now employers that have received PPP loans may also claim the ERC credit. The catch, however, is that qualified wages that are subject to a PPP loan forgiveness are not eligible for the employee retention credit. So employers need to take a close look at if they're seeking forgiveness of a PPP loan and for wages paid to employees. If the employer wants to claim the employee retention credit, they need to be aware of that and maybe not, it may make more sense to not seek loan forgiveness if they're going to get a credit for those wages under the employee retention credit. For the period of January 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2021, the legislation expands the employee retention credit in many ways. First of all, under the CARES Act, if an employer had over 100 employees, the credit was only available for wages paid to employees who did not work. Employers with 100 or fewer employees could claim the credit for wages paid to all employees, whether they were furloughed or remained actively employed. This recent legislation increases that threshold from 100 full-time employees to 500 employees. The credit itself is increased from 50% of qualified wages to 70% of qualified wages. The recent legislation also expands the employee retention credit by increasing the cap on qualified wages subject to the credit. So under the CARES Act, the credit was limited to $10,000 of qualified wages per employee per year. This expansion under the recent legislation provides that the limit is $10,000 per employee per calendar quarter. So that's an increase from $10,000 to $40,000 on an annual basis. Additionally, the required decline in gross receipts to qualify for the credit went from 50% decline in gross receipts to a 20% decline in gross receipts. So as you can see, this legislation has really expanded the employee retention credit, made it available to more employers, and made a greater amount of qualified wages eligible for the credit. So employers need to be aware of this and possibly take a look at whether they can qualify for the credit during 2021, or at least during the first half of 2021. The recent legislation also expands on the ability of employees to make changes to their flexible spending accounts and use money in their flexible spending arrangements. This applies to both health FSAs and dependent care FSAs. And it's consistent with guidance we received last year from the IRS, expanding the ability of employees to use FSA funds and make election changes. So under this legislation, an employee may carry over unused FSA funds from the 2020 plan year into the 2021 plan year, and carry over unused FSA funds from the 2021 plan year to the 2022 plan year. So in other words, the use it or lose it rule that always applies to FSAs really does not have to apply for the 2020 plan year or the 2021 plan year. Additionally, if a plan provides for a grace period to pay claims out of unused assets, the grace period for the 2020 and 2021 plan year may be extended for 12 months. So after the end of the 2021 plan year, unused funds from that year could be used up until the end of 2022 under the expanded grace period. Additionally, a plan may allow participants who cease participation in an FSA in 2020 or 2021 to continue to receive reimbursements from their contributions made to the accounts through the end of the plan year and any grace period following the plan year after they cease participation in the FSA. And then finally, participants during 2020 and 2021 may make election changes for any reason. So there's no requirement to have a qualified change in status or an event that would authorize them to make an election change. Under this legislation, in 2021, employees can increase or decrease their FSAs at will for any reason. Now, I say that all of this is only to the extent that it's permitted by the terms of the plan. And so under this legislation, plans must be amended for these changes by the end of the calendar year following the year of the change. And these changes are not mandatory. So an employer can choose to adopt some or all or none of these changes that are provided for under the Consolidated Appropriations Act. So that'll wrap up our discussion of the latest coronavirus relief legislation. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, please contact me. You can also visit our employee benefits page at williamsmullen.com/employee benefits. There you can find out more about our team as well as past episodes of this podcast and legal alerts. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when our next episode posts. Thanks for listening.